Hey there, welcome back to my channel. This is Allison from This Enchanted Hour, and today I want to talk with you all about spelling. Now, I originally intended to make a video just about how we use foundational phonics for spelling, but once I started kind of planning this video out, I realized, you know what, we've used a lot of things over the years, and foundational phonics just kind of helped seal the deal in a lot of those areas. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as far as some of the resources we've used over the years to help teach spelling. But I also want to talk about spelling as a whole, because I do think it's very important for a child to learn how to spell correctly and have the tools that they need to continue being good spellers as they go on through life. But I don't think it's the be-all, end-all if they are not a good speller right out of the gate. And I don't think moms should be putting pressure on themselves or their children to drill in spelling words as a method for them learning how to be proficient spellers. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit before I show you what we've used over the years for spelling. And hopefully this will help you and kind of ease your mind, knowing that as someone who deals with spelling on a day-to-day basis in work and life, I think we really give it a little bit too much emphasis in the early years that is causing a lot of stress and heartache and tears, and actually a hatred of spelling instead of a love for spelling. So we're going to try to remedy all that today. The first thing you need to know is what I believe about spelling. I have spent many years formulating my own philosophy of education because I think it's really important to know yourself what you believe about how something should be taught in order to be grasped. And that's going to look different for everybody, and that's fine. You do have the benefit that your children typically have your same DNA or your spouse's DNA, so you're kind of working within learning styles and modes that you are aware of. You know, if you know how you learn and you know how your spouse learns, that may be how your children learn as well. So that's just a little side note tidbit there. But I personally believe that spelling is just one of many components to effective communication. It's not the only one, so we don't want to give it more credit than it's due, but it definitely is important to spell words correctly so that people know what you mean. It's for meaning, not to prove that we're great at spelling or that we could win the National Spelling Bee or anything like that. The second thing is, I really believe, just in all my years of observing how children learn, how I've learned myself, and watching my own children and other people's children learn, I really think it is best taught through immersion. Just like we learn how to stand up and walk and crawl and talk, it's because we saw it modeled. And reading, we saw words over and over and over. That's how we've learned to read. So as children are approaching spelling, I tend to think of it in that sense of the more words they see, the more words they interact with, and it can be through a variety of things. It doesn't have to be writing them down, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the real key is just the sheer amount of words that they're seeing regularly will become so ingrained in their mind that there will not be a ton of words that they are going to struggle with spelling. They're going to know a lot or most of the words that they need to know to be effective communicators. So of course, you always need support, and we're going to talk about some of those support resources here in a second. But the other couple of things I want to mention is I don't believe spelling instruction has to be boring or rigorous. Nobody should be crying during spelling instruction, and I really think we probably start it sooner than we need to. I think we would probably encounter a lot less resistance to spelling if you do have a resistant speller. You might need to take a little break from that if that's the approach you've used and come at it in a more fun way. I myself have loved spelling since I was a little girl. I always have. And it's primarily because we've done all through my childhood and even into adulthood, I've always done fun things with spelling, like crosswords or word searches, or, you know, you watch Wheel of Fortune and you solve those puzzles, just very low stakes ways of practicing spelling. You know, nobody's testing me on anything. I'm just trying to guess a puzzle. That's really fun. That's fun for our brains to do that instead of being under the stress and maybe being tested on a certain word or something like that. Another few things that I think are really key to remember when you're not just teaching spelling, but outside of your maybe formal lessons on spelling, there's a couple of things. Number one, I really think good readers make naturally good spellers simply because they have seen so many words. So the more a child reads, the better speller they're going to be. I saw that in the classroom for many, many years through dozens and dozens of students. The ones that read a ton, even if it wasn't maybe the most intellectually stimulating books, they just were seeing a volume of words all the time, were the ones that were good spellers. It just kind of happened naturally for them. They didn't even have to think half the time of the words that we were learning in 7th grade when we would take a pretest, they would get them all and they wouldn't have any spelling homework and they wouldn't have to take a test at the end of the week because they already knew them. They had encountered them in their personal reading. So I think that's really key to know. If you get them to be good readers, that is the first step in pushing them later towards good spelling, good writing, and all the other components that they encounter. The other thing is that misspellings are going to be normal. And I think it's really important that we don't hold children to a higher standard than we would an adult. I deal a lot with marketing materials, and so I notice online when sponsored content on Instagram is misspelled or someone uses the wrong homophone. Instead of sneak peek with 2 E's, they use PEAK like a mountain, and everybody knows what they mean, but that instantly tells you they don't actually know how to spell that word, right? And maybe that's just me being, a nerd about that. Maybe I'm being too particular, but for me, that just tells me if they don't know how to spell the right word, then maybe that's not something I want to purchase if it pertains to learning about something. That really is more specific to like curriculum and stuff, but you guys know what I mean. The other thing, besides it being completely normal that kids are going to misspell, and therefore we should just help them correct it and problem solve. We don't need to beat them over the brow about it. Just if something's misspelled, that's what erasers are for. Erase it, fix it, and they'll probably remember it better from that. And the other hill I will die on, besides everyone makes mistakes in their spelling, is if your child comes to you and they're writing something and they ask you how to spell a word, please, for heaven's sake, just spell it for them. They are trying to compose something, and that is taking a massive amount of their brain power and mental energy to compose something, whether it's a letter, a story, essay, whatever it is. A completely different part of their brain is used to recall words and how you spell them. So please don't do that to them. If they're asking you how to spell a word, it's because in that exact moment right there, their mind is so busy with other things, they truly don't remember how to spell it. Don't turn it into a quiz. Just tell them how to spell the word. That I feel so strongly about that. And we have done that over the years with our kids, and it's actually made them more receptive to when they bring me something, and maybe it's something they want like my mom to read, their grandmother. They write a story, they want my mom to read it, they want her to be able to understand it. So I'll read it first. They'll say, can you read this first? I do. And then they'll say, if anything's spelled wrong, can you show me where it is so Mimi can read it. They are very heavily motivated to be understood. And because of that, they are willing to take my help and ask for my help to spell things. And I am a willing participant in that. I will help them spell any word they need to know. And over the years, they're going to ask less and less. The last thing I'll say, and by the way, all this is going to be in printable that you can get on my blog. I will link it down below. You don't have to recall everything I've just said. I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker sometimes, so it might make more sense in the printout if that's where you would like to go. But I also mentioned in there that if you notice the same word keeps being misspelled over and over, that would be a good time just to take a quick second to sit down, look at the word, and see with them, what are the root words here? What are in the syllables? What's the ending? Are there any silent letters? Just kind of helping them sort of think through and process words that they're trying to spell. And if it's something they've continued to misspell, then it probably does need to be addressed. But I don't think it has to be anything more than a quick conversation of, I notice you keep misspelling this. Let's look at this word for a second. As they grow older and as they gain more skills, as they're reading more, as they're writing more, a lot of the misspelling things are going to just kind of work themselves out. I've just seen that over the years with my kids spelling and with kids that I taught, even just in a year's time. In the classroom, I was only with them for a year at a time, same class, for 1 year. So I think it's really important to remember it does not have to be some overly rigorous drill type method to help someone who keeps misspelling the wrong word. Just look at it and fix it. I mean, that's how we would do it if we were looking at our own writing and editing our own writing. So all that being said, let's dive into some of the things that we've used over the years that help with spelling. And then I'm also going to turn the camera around and show you in particular in foundational phonics where I really found some of the instruction in there to be key for handling spelling simultaneous to as they were learning to read. It really was, a time saver to approach it that way. So one of the first things I want to show is really fun. This is a remake of something from the 80s. It's a speak and spell. And I just have this laying around our living room. We live in a very small house and we're always in the living room together. And this is just laying around. And I have just shown them how to use it. The first day we got it, I sat down, showed them how to use it, played some puzzles with them. And I did not make a big deal. I think this is critical here. I did not make a big deal about, you need to sit down and play with this for 30 minutes a day to improve your spelling. I didn't say any of that stuff. I sat down, showed them how to use it. They've seen me play with it. I've just picked it up sometimes when I'm bored and we're just hanging around the house. I just pick it up and start playing with it. And that was intentional. I was not really wanting to play with the speak and spell, although it is fun. I was trying to model how you use this. You just pick it up and play with it. Some of the draw of this might be because my kids do not have screens, and this is as close to a screen as they were going to get. So that was heavily motivating for them to learn how to spell because they could use something that sort of had a screen. So I say that in jest, but you know what I mean. Sometimes we reach for things because there is no alternative. So this is just a really fun way that they've learned to not only spell. There's 4 levels of spelling words in here. I'm not exactly sure how they chose the spelling words, but I've been pretty impressed with the variety. 4 different levels of that. And then there's like mystery puzzles and almost like Wheel of Fortune where you have blanks and you kind of guess what it is based on what you're filling the letters in with. So that's been really fun. And another one that we've used a lot, which you could also use Scrabble for this, is bananagrams. So these are just little word tiles that have the letters on them. And typically all I've done, I'm sure there's a specific way to play this, but I'm notorious for not reading instructions on games. I'm sure there's some reason for that, but I just don't like to do it. I want to do my own thing with the game, and that's just how it is. So I dump out the tiles and we will just pick up ones and try to make words out of them. And I've used opportunities like that in non-school time, non-formal lesson time, where we dump those out, we're looking at them, and I'll see something like a compound word, like lampstand would be an example. So like, let's say my daughter spells lamp and I have enough letters to spell stand. Well, I can spell stand, and then I can show her that lamp stand is one word, and you just slide them together. So that word is made up of the words lamp and stand. So I've done really organic, natural things like that. That have not put a lot of pressure on them to know how to spell in the moment. And I've always been willing to help. If they're like, I don't know that I have enough words or letters, to make words. Let me figure out how to do that. I've just typically helped them. I don't see anything wrong with collaborating with your children on learning. Another resource that we have, and I'll turn the camera around for foundational phonics, but this one I think you'll get the gist with me holding it up. So these are daily word ladders. We were introduced to these many, many years ago before I ever found foundational phonics by, I think, Laura from Firefly Nature School. We used to do a lot of her studies, and we still do, but anyways. So we have done the first grade one book of this. We've done the 2nd and 3rd grade, and now we're in the 4th through 6th grade because that's the age of my children. And I have loved using this alongside foundational phonics because in the early years, it starts with CVC words, and then it works its way up to where we are now, which is much more complicated words. And all you're doing, actually, I could probably show you from the front. Let me get a good space here. So the word vegetable is offered, and then they give you a clue about what letters to drop, and they give you a clue about what new words you're going to create. So like this one says, vegetable is our anchor word, and then it says a piece of furniture at which you eat meals. Take away 4 letters. And so we just crossed out VEGE to get table, and they very quickly picked up on this. And because we've done it since 1st grade, they're both very adept at this. And my son last year started taking the previous volume of this, the grade before. He used to just take it and do it by himself. He loved it that much. He would just take it and do it by himself. And then if there were ones that were a little harder, especially in this one, the 4th through 6th is really giving them some challenging thoughts. They will give you a star. So that way, that might be one you have to help them on. Or sometimes they can just get it. So one thing that this has really helped me assess with my children was not only am I seeing that they know how to change one word to another, spelling wise, they also have a lot more vocabulary words in their brain than I knew they had. And I know a lot of that is from reading aloud. I could do a whole video about the impact of reading aloud on every aspect of literacy. So I'll save that for another time because I could talk forever. But this in particular has been really critical in helping them understand how changing just a letter or two can really change a word. And it has helped support us in foundational phonics without really needing a separate spelling curriculum. This was kind of addressing anything that foundational phonics was not. I hope that's coming across when I say that. The other thing too is that I think your attitude about spelling is pretty crucial. Like I said, I love spelling, but I know some people don't. And I know for some people it's intimidating, or some people have dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyspraxia or any learning difference that's going to hinder you from being a good speller. And what I've really discovered over the years of working with children of various abilities and with various maybe differences in how they learn things, everybody kind of comes up with their own way of doing it, their own way of learning it, if you present it to them. You may have to work with a child that has dyslexia a little harder on not reversing letters, especially if it's like mild dyslexia and that's where they really struggle, is reversing letters. They may simply need to just see the words more. They may need to read them more. They may need to, when they're listening to an audiobook, they may need the book in front of them, just allowing their ears and their eyes to make that connection at the same time. That might be really helpful for a child that struggles with dyslexia or other learning differences. So I didn't want to leave that out and just say this was like, you know, what you should do for every child, because every child's going to be different. And especially if you have something like dyslexia, you want to address that in certain ways. But I think that's where what I'm going to show you in foundational phonics really comes in handy for teaching children, not just to read with dyslexia, but to spell with dyslexia. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we're going to dive into that. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of informally show you how spelling was addressed simultaneously to reading instruction in foundational phonics. And that's really the reason why I have not needed a separate spelling curriculum of any sort just yet. I'm sure there might be a day that's coming where we need a little extra spelling instruction, but for the early years, this was really all that we needed. I actually talked in other videos about going back through the second book in this series as just completely as a spelling curriculum, but I have found over the past few months that my children's spelling has developed in such a way that that's probably not going to be necessary to go start to finish back through word mastery again. I'm just going to use it to address any words in the later chapters that are getting a little more complicated, have different or unusual endings and things like that, just as needed. As we come upon those words in their writing, we're going to address it then by kind of using this as a guide. So I've changed my approach to this a little bit just because my kids have matured over the last few months since I made that previous video, and so things have changed, and so we just adapt and go on as they need us to. But the first thing I want to talk about is the word building aspect of foundational phonics. In each lesson in letter mastery, they are working on just beginning to spell CVC words. So they take a J and the A and the M, and this is your kinesthetic component as well. This helps your kinesthetic children. And then you can say, let's turn jam to ham. How would we do that with the cards we have? And then put an H. Or they could say, what other words can you make with am? Well, am's its own word. Or I have a friend named Sam. Why don't you switch the M with the N and you can spell man. So we literally just played around with it like that. We did this in every lesson, and then also where they talk about the ASL alphabet. I wanted to point that out a little bit because we also use that for beginning word building. At the beginning of every chapter in letter mastery, you have this kind of opener, introduces the letter, and then there's an alliterative phrase that lets you practice the letter sound, and then it gives you the American Sign Language symbol for that letter. And so when we would skip to word building, especially because my daughter was older when we did this, older than the typical demographic, when we got to word building, after we'd play with the cards, I would say, spell man, and she would make, you know, the M and the whatever else to spell man. So that was another kinesthetic component we added to early spelling of those CVC words. Also focuses on eye, ear, and tongue training. And that was a really unique component that I think has built in extra spelling skills as well, because if they can really hear the sounds in the word and they know how to say them, when they pronounce them, they will figure out how to spell them. And when they read them, they will know how to spell them because they have been practicing what it sounds like and what it looks like in that eye, ear, and tongue training. That's such a heavy component of this first book. And then moving on to the second book, I was just going to kind of show you what we did. This is the current edition. We actually used the second edition of Word Mastery with my daughter, but it's very similar. The only thing that's changed is the font, but I didn't want to confuse anybody. So I'm just going to show you this new one. It starts with pencil grasp and all those good things. And then once you progress past those CVC words that you had been building all along, you could continue, and we did continue. We would use the card sometimes, and I would have her spell these again as we went through. But when you start getting into spelling rules like silent E, changing fad to fade, mad to made, they're sort of internalizing those as they go as far as spelling. I found that these are not words that were super difficult for them to grasp spelling wise. It's just understanding, oh, that has a long vowel sound, not a short one, so it has to have an E at the end. Most times. I mean, there's always exceptions to every rule. There are little notes like this. Here's one. Okay. So for example, when you're making something plural, you add an S. And then as time goes on, you can show them the words that you add an ES to instead. And there's a rule for that. So although the spelling is not maybe pointed out really, really significantly in this, there are definitely some foundational skills you're building in spelling that are going to be key for them later on. And this is why I think I really didn't have to have a separate spelling curriculum, because it just kind of was embedded into this. So another example is the syllables practice. So she says right here that a syllable is part of a word that has a vowel sound in it. A vowel can form a syllable by itself or with the help of its neighboring consonants. And what we did here was I was showing them how every syllable has to have a vowel in it. So when you're learning how to spell something, if they wrote apple and they can tell apple, that's 2 syllables. Well, they can hear app. They can hear that just fine. Pull, they can hear the sounds of that. But we don't have a vowel there. So if they were spelling apple, just as an example, and they know that every syllable has to have a vowel in it, they know something's missing if they just wrote apple. So they would go, add that E, or I would even tell them that. Same with something like puppy. The reason why is sometimes a vowel is because we need a vowel in every syllable. And we would go over that anytime it was brought up in the curriculum, in the little notes at the top like that, we would go over that type of thing. So that really helped them. So here where we're learning the sort of odd sounds that letters together make, she has grouped them by word family so that kids are putting together the fact that taught is spelled very similar to caught. It's just they have a different beginning sound. So they're really learning to kind of organize their information through these word boxes. And then anywhere there is an exception to the rule, she has put it in a box, the author of this. So that made it really easy, especially for my son who has trouble sometimes organizing his information, to understand what he's supposed to do. Another example that I had is in the CS. I wanted to point this out. Okay. So a lot of the clues that she gives you for pronouncing in here, we have also used for understanding spelling. So for instance, she shows right here that when C is written before E, I, or Y, it will often say the soft sound S. So for example, let's say the word dance. A lot of kids will write an S there because they hear an S. And so as we were going through these books and talking about this, and especially down here in the copy work where they would be copying something, I would make a point to say, especially if they misspelled dance somewhere, I would say, don't you remember that sometimes CE together makes a S sound? So in dance, it's like Dan, like the beginning of the name Daniel, and S, but it's a CE this time. And again, they've already done these word families. And I think for some reason, just that going through step by step and seeing, just changing one letter at a time, kind of like those daily word letters I talked about, and then having just a few exceptions explained to you, it really wasn't necessary for them to learn a whole bunch of spelling rules or memorize them. And also, spelling rules are helpful, but so many words do not follow spelling rules that sometimes it can be complicated, more complicated to have them memorize rules than to just sort of learn what the words look like, what they're supposed to look like. So I just wanted to show you a few things in here, even getting into things like this, because she has grouped this in such a way that everything is its own category. Special C has its own dedicated space. Bossy R, that's another one, has its own dedicated space. They're learning this little by little and they're internalizing it. And then they're also reading, their own personal reading and seeing these words again. So it's really just a matter of multiple exposures in different ways, multi-sensory ways for them to really internalize the way something is spelled. So I hope all this has been helpful. What I really wanted to do in particular for those of you that are using foundational phonics was just to show you how that particular curriculum is providing everything you need for beginning reading and spelling. And it's really going to help them in the long run as they grow and progress in their reading to become better spellers. It almost seems too simple that one curriculum can do that, but really the way that it's structured and set up, you really can use it just as is, and the spelling skills are built in there. You don't have to worry about teaching separate spelling rules and things like that. I've had several people ask me about that. So I did want to pop back in here and say that in specifically addressing foundational phonics and using that, it is enough. It is plenty for you to teach your child how to read and to spell and proper sentence structure and all those other good things that tie into literacy. So just rest assured in that they're getting everything they need in that particular curriculum. But also know, if that is not the way that you taught your children how to read, it's okay. There's still other ways, and some of them I showed in here, that you can kind of naturally help your child progress to better and better spelling. And obviously reading to themselves is one of the biggest ones, but there's lots of other fun ways too, is what I really wanted to get across. So if you want that printable, it is down in the description box below. You just click it. It's free. It will have everything I just talked about in probably a more cohesive manner, because like I said, I'm just better with writing. That's just where my forte is. But we're doing our best over here with speaking. So I hope this has come across. I hope it's been an encouragement to you, and I hope to see you again soon in another video.